For 2,000 years, the academic establishment has misread the functional utility of the most influential political text in human history. Traditional scholarship classifies the works of Plato as abstract metaphysics and theoretical ethics, as seen in this static classical depiction. While this approach has generated centuries of debate, it has provided no actionable mechanisms to prevent the systemic crises we face today. In January 2026, systems architect A.C. Beckingham released The Architect's Republica, an audit that approaches the Platonic Corpus from an engineering perspective. Beckingham identifies these texts as technical documentation designed to map the mechanical collapse patterns of complex societies. Texts like the Republic and Timaeus detail the specific sequences that cause a sociotechnical system to break. Treating these works as abstract theory leaves us unable to use their specific survival diagnostics. We begin by defining a civilizational failure mode, the mechanical sequence of events that causes a complex society to inevitably collapse. Plato viewed this collapse as a structural inevitability that occurs whenever specific operational parameters are violated. Beckingham's method uses a structural overlay to map Greek political concepts directly into systems engineering terminology. A structural reading reveals the Republic as a set of protocols for maintaining systemic alignment between a society and its environment. This overlay allows us to peel back the layers of current institutional failures to see the underlying architecture. The core of this diagnostic is extracted from a specific technical analogy, the ship of state. We will use this model as a live mechanical blueprint to understand why modern societal architecture is breaking down. To understand the failure, we must first establish the healthy baseline architecture of a coherent society. This flowchart shows the feedback loop. At the base is structural reality. Above is the coordination layer, which reads the environment and steers the system to avoid hazards, producing a coherence metric showing its alignment with reality. High coherence means decisions are strictly dictated by physical constraints and the laws of the universe. Systemic noise appears when the coordination layer begins filtering reality through its own subjective biases. Plato's protocol dictates that the coordination layer must remain subordinate to the structural base at all times. A society maintains laminar flow, smooth, stable operation, as long as its managerial class submits to the dictates of physical reality. The primary diagnostic identified by Beckingham is a condition called the mutiny of the managers. In the ship of state analogy, the crew overthrows the navigator. This represents a systemic hijacking. Failure begins the moment managers stop optimizing for environmental navigation and start optimizing for their own control over the ship. This causes a topological inversion. The system stops looking outward at reality and turns its focus entirely inward toward its own hierarchy. This inversion severs the feedback loop. The coordination block seals itself off, creating a rapid, isolated loop ignoring external data. The managers now feed on their internal output, blinding them to the base layer, which degrades from neglect. This internal decoupling triggers collapse. The system fails because it can no longer respond to the physical requirements of its environment. When a society's management architecture ignores physical constraints to secure its own position, the system enters a state of terminal feedback failure. The texts, the Sophist and Gorgias, explain how this decoupled management maintains its position. Sophistry is the active substitution of image, or virtual representation, for structure, or ground truth. The managerial layer uses persuasion, relies on optics, and manufactured metrics to simulate functionality, even as the system breaks. This causes informational degradation. The system begins to prioritize how things appear on paper over how they actually function. Corrupted data cascades through the architecture. As the central hub pumps out false metrics, the peripheral nodes relying on that data begin shutting down. This mirrors our modern economy's focus on financialization and public relations over tangible production. A society managed entirely by image cannot survive because the physical universe does not respond to public relations. By zooming out, we can map this political diagnostic onto the principles of coherence geometrodynamics. This drift creates the Zeno Trap of nations. The Zeno Trap is a state where a civilization's internal coordination is so loud that it drowns out its survival signals. The simulated reality of the managers completely overwrites ground truth. This diagram shows the universal matrix conceptual scheme, illustrating the ETU torus, the rigid architecture our systems must align with. Notice the stability margin of 2.87%. Crossing this threshold triggers a transition to turbulent decoherence. Our managerial decoupling has pushed us to this exact edge. The Zeno Trap Plato documented is not just a political crisis, it is a mechanical state where our internal metrics have diverged too far from the universal constants. Plato's final contribution is a protocol for systemic realignment. The forms and the educational structure in the Republic act as hard-coded constraints designed to create an unhackable coordination layer. The protocol requires managers to undergo ego transcendence, removing the desire for internal control to focus purely on environmental navigation. This correction purges the isolated loop. A structural tether is forged, locking the coordination layer back into direct alignment with structural reality. The architect's Republica presents a choice: align with the universal operating system or face a turbulent reset. We must deploy these protocols as the blueprints of a systems architect who understood the mechanics of our survival.